So have you ever looked at another coach's content and thought, wow, that's mediocre at best, and you discovered that they're making bank while you're struggling to sign clients at a fraction of their price? And I know it's frustrating because you've been spending years mastering your craft, your content is better, your knowledge is deeper, but somehow these average coaches with basic advice keep stealing your dream clients and out earn you month over month. Because most of you think that getting better results or creating better or valuable content is the key to charge these premium prices. If I just improve my coaching skills or I create better content, I'll attract higher paying clients. But here's what I discovered after studying dozens of these quote unquote mediocre coaches who are absolutely crushing it, and it almost has nothing to do with the quality of their content or even their client results. Instead, they're using a very specific positioning framework that most of these skilled coaches completely miss, right? Now, I want to be completely honest and transparent here. I'm not this seven-figure guru who's trying to tell you how to do stuff, but in fact, this is exactly why I noticed that this pattern exists and what most of these insiders are missing. Okay, so in this video, I'm breaking down the exact positioning framework that these coaches use to command premium prices despite even having average content at best. So I'll show you these 5 psychological triggers that activate the buyer psychology and why they work so effectively and how you can ethically apply them to your own coaching business without compromising your integrity, which is what matters at the end of the day. So the first thing here is that these mediocre coaches understand is what I call the authority paradox, right? Most of you try to position yourselves as the ultimate authority in your niche, right? The guru, the expert, the master. But this actually creates a very big psychological distance between you and the audience, like you can see here, okay? What these mediocre coaches do instead is that they position themselves as the experienced guide, someone who's just a few steps ahead of their clients, but close enough that success feels attainable, so that they don't hide their flaws, they actually strategically reveal them. For example, instead of saying, hey, I've helped 1,000 people change their lives, they say, after struggling for years, I discovered this approach and it helped me do X, Y, and Z, right? Do you see how the second statement actually builds more trust because it feels so much more relatable and achievable and authentic? Does that make sense? Now, this is counterintuitive because we assume that clients want perfection, but what they really want is proof that someone like them has done that before. And when you position yourself as too perfect, like too put together, you just put yourself too far ahead. You actually create doubt whether your methods will actually work on quote unquote normal people. Okay, so keep that in mind. The second positioning secret is that what I call the authority, the results frame. Okay, most of you try to sell big transformative results like lose 50 pounds, make 6 figures, find your soulmate, whatever these promises are. But these big promises trigger skepticism. These mediocre coaches that I'm talking about who make the bank do not focus on these end results, these big results. They focus on removing specific obstacles which are smaller instead. Instead of promising 6-figure businesses, they promise to eliminate client objections during sales calls. Instead of total body transformation, for instance, they promise to break through the energy crash in the afternoon. Do you see how nuanced they make it? This is very powerful because it feels much more tangible as a promise and more believable. So by focusing on removing these minor obstacles rather than delivering end results, these coaches create this immediate value perception. So the prospect thinks, if he can solve this one little problem that's driving me crazy, then it's probably worth investing with him. This creates a very high perceived value anyway. Third part is the scarcity switch. Now this is, I would say, arguably the most powerful of all of these strategies. Now most coaches try to serve everyone in their niche, positioning themselves as able to be helping anyone with a particular problem. But the problem with this is it just doesn't work. But the coaches who are crushing it do the exact opposite. They explicitly define who they do not and will not work with. And they might say this isn't for beginners, or I only work with people who have already achieved X, or my approach works for Y personality type, or whatever the thing is. But by defining who they would not work with, they instantly create this perceived scarcity and exclusivity. So prospects now, to qualify, they need to qualify themselves first rather than being sold to. So this flip makes people want to prove they belong in this selected group, which is kind of crazy to think about. So this exclusivity positioning, like you'd call it, is the single most powerful psychological trigger that I've observed, to be honest with you. So when a prospect has to qualify themselves to work with you rather than you trying to convince them to work with you, the entire power dynamics and the frame shifts. Now they're selling themselves to you, okay, which is basically what you want, right? Now, fourth point is, I talk about this a lot on this channel, which is the mechanism that, because most of you use common terminology that makes you blend in with every other coach in your niche. And the problem with that is it's just not going to be very powerful enough to pierce through the market. So these quote unquote mediocre coaches create new languages for standard concepts. Instead of saying, hey, I teach mindset coaching, or they say, hey, I use the conviction calibration method, whatever the name is. And people who just say nutrition coaching are not going to perform as well as the people who are going to say metabolic whatever system. Does that make sense? Now, you got to have a nuance here. Whenever you're creating a name, you don't want to confuse the buyer, okay? Because a confused buyer never buys. So you want to use their language in a way that feels unique, but it actually is something that they do understand. So by naming their process, they create this perception of a unique methodology that they and only they can deliver. So this makes commoditized services feel like proprietary knowledge, okay, which is what you want to do. You do not want to be commoditized. So when you create a named framework, you transform yourself from the generic, coach to the owner of a unique solution. And so you no longer are competing on price because you're not selling coaching. You're selling access to your unique methodology that cannot be directly, compared to any other competitors or alternatives. Okay. Now, fifth point here is pricing. The problem is most of you start with low prices and try to gradually increase them as you gain experience and testimonials, which is, kind of makes sense, right? But these other groups of coaches that I just told you about do the exact opposite. They start with premium pricing from day one. They understand that pricing itself is a positioning element. So by charging premium rates, they attract these clients who are extra committed, who get them better results. And so they do not compete with price. They specifically point out why they're more expensive, and they might say, yes, you can actually find coaches who charge less, but they'll take maybe 50 clients at once. They just kind of like know how to position themselves in comparison to those who undercharge. So it signals this kind of like value commitment. By positioning that as a benefit rather than an obstacle, they attract serious clients who are actually ready to invest in themselves. Okay, so when you actually do this, you just don't want to crank up the price. You want to anchor it as a benefit in and of itself. So there you have it, the 5 positioning secrets that these quote-unquote mediocre coaches used to out-earn most of you. And so the beauty of this framework is that it works whether you're just starting out or even if you were working in coaching for years. So here's my challenge to you. So take just maybe one of these elements and implement them in your business this week. So rewrite your messaging using the authority paradox, or if you want to change your methodology name, or if you want to specifically target who you're going to say no to activate the scarcity switch, do that. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit that subscribe button, because next week has more sauce incoming. And so drop a comment below with which of these 5 you're going to change today, and I'll personally respond with specific suggestions for your coaching niche. I hope this was helpful. Bye.